And I think that the gender in later life, if I look at significant work in my life, that's probably one of the most significant. People still quote it and saw it as, kind of agenda setting and kind of really changing the mould, because there haven't really been any book length treatments of, gender and aging, gender and later life at all, anywhere, and certainly not from a more sociological perspective. So it was a sociology, and it was broadly based. It used quantitative data, looking at older women's disadvantage in terms of their pensions, particularly older women's disadvantage in terms of levels of disability, older women's disadvantage in terms of living alone, widowhood, and so on. Older women's, and access to caregivers and caregiving, and so on and so forth. So it kind of went through a whole kind of range of things. And it really did have a big impact, both in the UK and internationally, and that led to invitations abroad to do things, and people still quoting it and so on. So it was totally quantitative, yeah.
And it was based on.
It was based on analysis of general household survey data.
Yeah.
Quite large, yes.
And what impact did it have?
Well, I think it had an impact in the sense that it put onto the agenda feminist sociology of ageing, older women's issues from a sociological perspective, and that you can't just talk about older women, older people, as kind of all deprived, disadvantaged, and so on. So that that was kind of the first looking at amongst older people. There is a range. Men, some men are quite advantaged. Most women were not terribly advantaged, and why they weren't advantaged. But so I think it was bringing it out, disadvantage and advantage, and what are the mechanisms through which, those advantages and disadvantages become perpetuated. And then obviously a whole load of work looking at pensions, so women's pensions being absolutely terrible, and again, divorced women. A lot of older divorce had been increasing in the 70s and so on. So older women entering later life as divorced, or being older divorced women, were completely disadvantaged. They're the poorest group of any, basically. Whereas widowed women, there was a disadvantage as married, but a lot of, not all, but a lot of widowed women inherit at least part of their pensions and so on. But because women didn't have pensions in their own right, so part of all that work on pensions was, to what extent women do or should have pensions in their own right from their own occupations. I'm not saying things are as bad as they were 20 years ago, but now, but it's still the case. Women tend to be disadvantaged financially in later life quite a lot, and they're much more likely to be disabled. They're much more likely to be widowed, living alone, etc., etc. But they do have better pension than whoever.
I was surprised that we actually are more disabled. I know we live longer, but I didn't realise that
we
get less.
You see, men die from things, and women get disabled. But now more men are, surviving with disabilities as well, because you just kill people. Now they kind of carry on. So there are much more longer term marriages than there used to be, because men are the gender gap in mortality or expectation of life is now less than 4 years. It used to be about 7 years, and obviously that's then compounded by the age differences in marriage. So women are still much more likely to be widowed. So that as I always say, men die married. I mean, if you look at men over the age of 65, something like 85% are married, and then if men are widowed, they're much more likely to remarry.
Yeah.